Good morning, YouTube. All right, so today we are going to talk about a reverse diet versus a recovery diet. Which one is right for you? Okay. Everyone's heard of a reverse diet that's been in bodybuilding. Most of you have, and most of you know that it's about the post-show period and coming out of that post-show period without putting on too much body fat, right? And slowly, bringing calories up, cardio down, etc. Okay, so we're gonna talk about the differences, and we're gonna talk about which one is right for different applications, different situations. Every athlete is gonna be different. Every situation is gonna be different. Depending on your situation, we're gonna figure out which one is right for you. Okay. A lot of people struggle with coming out of that post-show period with appetite. Sometimes it's worse than prep. So here's where we start, okay? There is a few types of athletes that need to stick to a reverse diet. Number one, if you are a competitor, let's say in the pro league, that needs to stay within striking distance, meaning not putting on too much body fat, staying pretty conditioned in the off season so that you can compete again pretty soon. Let's say you're going from the Olympia to the Arnold, okay? Not a lot of time in between, not a lot of time for, growth or anything like that. You need to stay within striking distance. Bikini competitors that have to compete multiple times per year. This is definitely, something for you, most likely. So, a couple other, situations where we want to stick to a reverse diet. You are an athlete that is going to have a very, very, very long off season, maybe 18 months to 24 months off season. Or you are an athlete that needs to, again, stay within striking distance to compete a little bit more often. And another situation is you are an athlete that is very close to their weight cap. Let's say a classic physique competitor. You've already kind of maxed out that weight cap. You do not have a lot of room to grow, and you need to stay within, again, striking distance or within the parameters there so you don't put on too much weight in the off season where it's very hard for you to come back down the next time. Another example would be like a 212 competitor that's already maxed out at the 212. If you put on too much weight, quickly, it's going to be a lot harder, especially because your body is very sensitive coming out of the post-show period to put on weight. So it's going to be a little bit harder later on to bring that weight down. Now, we do have contest preparations, let's say 16 to 20 weeks, should be enough time to bring body fat down. But if you do not have a lot of room to gain muscle, you do not have a lot of room to let your body creep up, especially in that post-show period. You will put on body fat, but you will put on muscle. Especially if you're training hard, not taking, a lot of people will just take off from the gym after the show. Or, someone like Chris Bumstead, who has already maxed out their weight cap, they don't need to put on any size. They can take time off from the gym in that post-show period and make sure that they're staying, pretty lean and not eating too much. And with reverse dieting, if, now we want to, in that post-show period, start to recover our hormones a little bit so that we can sleep better, feel less fatigued, etc. A reverse diet is slowly tapering. Let's say post-show, you might have a meal out to eat with the family after the show, but then like the next day, you're back on diet. And you're kind of like replicating that same base diet that you had, before peak week. So you're not letting your body weight creep up too high, especially in that first week. So you're probably going back to base plan with a decent amount of cardio, but that's going to be slowly tapered down over the weeks. And diet is going to slowly creep back up. But you can kind of replicate that base diet that you had pre-peak week. Now, when we're talking about staying within striking distance, Body weight wise, it's going to be different for everyone. You know, a bikini competitor versus a, you know, an open bodybuilder. But let's just say this open bodybuilder is going from the Olympia to the Arnold. You know, body fat wise, weight wise, they don't have to worry about their weight so much. Same thing with a bikini competitor. They don't have to worry about their actual weight, but body fat levels, yeah. So we want to kind of maintain a certain level of conditioning through this period so that it's easy to come down going towards that let's say the Arnold or coming towards that next show, right? You don't have a lot of time to let body fat creep up and then have to like come back down real hard because that's going to take a lot of time and you may not have a lot of time. Now, I've done both reverse and recovery diet, and I've used reverse for clients, certain clients. Again, if you're having a very long off season where you're going to have, you know, 12, 18, 24 months off the stage, completely no prepping, reverse dieting is for you. Okay, and the reason being is because you have plenty of time to push body weight up later on in an off season to grow. Let's just say you are a classic physique competitor that needs to put on 10, 15 pounds. The reverse diet, you know, and you do have a year and a half to 2 years to do it. Reverse dieting, maintaining, you know, good health markers, but letting that fatigue kind of slowly come back down, and then you're in a good spot to, you know, maybe 2 months, 3 months later, do an off-season push phase, and then you have time to even, you know, come back down in body fat like a mini cut later on, and you know, things like that. Maybe you can do 2 off-season push phases in that time period, you know, in a 2-year time frame, something like that, or 18 months. So, with that athlete that has that longer off season, there's no need to let your body weight come up so fast post show. Try to maintain that level of conditioning, you know, a little bit more conditioning. You know, not the same level of conditioning that you were on stage because it's not going to happen. You do need to let your hormones recover. That requires a certain amount of body fat to be put on to sleep better, training performance to climb, that kind of thing. But in that post show period, that's not the time to push. You know, let your body, you know, push your body weight up and push training super hard and that kind of thing, because you have plenty of time later on to do that. Give your body a break. You just did a, you know, a 4, 5, 6 month prep. Give your body a break, especially if, you know, PEDs were used, that kind of thing. This is the time to clean out, come down off of that kind of stuff, do blood work, and just kind of chill, right? And then we have time later on to push back up, and you'll have plenty of time to do that. Now, for the athlete that, let's say, wants to get on stage within 1 year, but they need to put on a lot of size within that year, or even muscle density, you know, let's just say 10 pounds, 15 pounds within a year, something like that. Okay, the post-show period, and we'll talk about rebound phase, which will go, you know, that can be done with a reverse diet or recovery diet. Rebound phase versus a health phase. Okay, if you had a 8-week prep, for example, not very long at all, you could probably afford to do a rebound phase and keep PEDs, supplements a little higher coming out of the show, and use that for a little bit of growth coming out of the show, paired with food, bringing cardio down, bringing fatigue down, better sleep, etc. Now, if you've done a 16, 20-week prep or more, and you're using PEDs throughout this whole entire time, this is the time to do a health phase. Now, coming out of the show, it's not uncommon, especially for males, you know, maybe they have that meal post-show with family, maybe they get back, you know, and we'll talk about the recovery diet and the details of that in a second, but that body weight is going to come up a little bit faster than, let's say, a female. And you know what, it's not uncommon for a male to put on 10 to 15 pounds within, you know, I would say within the 4 weeks of the post-show period. And letting your body come back into homeostasis there, a little bit higher body fat levels. Now, a lot of people will say, you know what, post-show, and let's go back to the rebound for a second. Post-show is not really the time to put on muscle. Okay, but to put on muscle, it requires not being too lean, And we want to maintain insulin sensitivity here because throughout the prep, you got lean, you gained all this insulin sensitivity. We want to take advantage of that coming out of the show. So not going too crazy on food, but bringing food up to a point where reverse dieting, let's just say post-show, we go back to like, that pre-show diet or that pre-peak week diet, and or maybe at maintenance calories, something like that. Whereas a recovery diet is maybe like 10% above maintenance calories to kind of let body weight come up a little faster. And like I said, for males, might not be uncommon to see a 10, 15 pound increase, maybe within even the first 2 weeks. So, with that being said, okay, a lot of people will say post show is not the time to put on muscle. We got to wait for our push phase. Okay, but we don't have a lot of time. Let's say push phase is 4 months, and we have 1 year to put on a certain amount of body mass, let's say 10 to 15 pounds, okay, within that 1 year. In the post show period, if you start a recovery diet, you can get your hormones recover a little faster, sleep, improves, training performance climbs, and that's where we actually can gain a little bit of muscle tissue there. Now, it is going to come with some body fat gain, and you have to be okay with that. Okay, this is not the time to obsess over glute striations anymore. We were obsessing over that in prep. Now is the time, okay, I need to put on muscle size. And to do that, I need performance in the gym, better sleep, better recovery, and food. PEDs, now, especially if you did a longer prep, you don't need high doses of PEDs. In fact, these things can kind of come down to like TRT dosages or HRT dosages. Okay, so because your body is going to be able to utilize food and get a lot of growth just from food alone and lower fatigue. Like I said, something around the 5 to 10% increase in calories above your maintenance calories. And in this phase, let's just say it's 8 weeks of a health phase, right? And you're putting on, and you can kind of put on a little bit of muscle tissue here before, initially before that actual push phase, off season phase starts. We just have to, let's just say, especially if eating is an issue, right? Like once a week, twice a week, or more than that, snacking in between meals. That's where you're having to like pull back calories on other days just to be able to fit in that free meal. And I think that's the wrong way to go about it because you should be trying to eat more stable calories, higher calories, let's say 10% above maintenance every day for training so that you're able to push training performance. Not have this huge cheat meal, then the rest of the week having to keep lower calories to offset the amount of calories you ate in that one meal. Also, I've noticed it really messes with digestion, and so for a couple of days, your actual training performance is not that great. You kind of feel shitty in the gym. Pumps may not be as good. You just feel bogged down. It's important to start, to want to keep feeling good, in that post-show period. And what I mean is you actually should be feeling better than you were in prep. Better sleep, etc. So, more energy to go out and do things, start to have a little bit more balance with your other parts of life, relationship, work, and social life, etc. So, we don't want to have this big swing in calories of, once a week it's going way up and then we're having to bring it down for the rest of the week because that's not helping your training performance. We want to focus on training performance, so higher calories, more stable throughout the week, so that it's helping the training performance steadily climb and progressively overload, etc. This is also the time to where, if the judges gave you feedback to put on muscle in a certain area, that post-show phase, this is the time to, implement a training program that's geared towards bringing up those lagging body parts. And you can get even deeper into that in a post-show, in a push off-season phase with higher PEDs, et cetera, and higher food. So, but we don't start with like the maximum volume that we can do. Let's just say you got to bring up your arms. We don't start with, we're not doing 30 sets per week right out, post-show. Start at like the minimal effective dosage. Let's just say, even for chest or something like that, 12 sets per week in prep. If you were doing 10, you can up that to 12 sets per week, across 2 sessions. Maybe you want to increase some frequency. And so instead of doing arms, 3 times a week, you do it 4 times a week, something like that. And we won't get too deep into training and how training should be structured, but this is not the time to do maximal effective doses. Start with minimal effective dosage on the training. Now save a little bit higher volume for that push phase when PEDs are higher and food is higher. So you keep that 10% above maintenance calories throughout this health phase. If body weight needs to come up a little bit higher because you're still a little too lean, then it can. Then it can come up, to 12.5%, 15% above maintenance calories before you get to that actual push phase, where PEDs start to come in. And then honestly, you don't need to push food too high above maintenance to really get muscle gain going in that push phase with PEDs. So that recovery diet is beneficial for athletes that need to put on a little bit more, a lot of size within a shorter time frame. So let's map it out like on a timeline. So post-show, you get an 8-week health phase, push food up 10% above maintenance calories. Maybe your body weight comes 10, 15 pounds above your stage weight. You can kind of maintain that there, so we're not getting accruing too much body fat in this time frame, with low PEDs. Then that 8-week health phase goes by, blood work is done, everything looks good. Now we go into that that off-season push phase where PEDs come up. Now we don't need to add on too much food on top of that because PEDs are going to do a lot of the work for us, but can't just rely on that. Food will have to go up at a certain point if body weight is not going up. Let the push phase supplements kind of, just take it week by week. If body weight goes up, you're fine. You don't really need to increase food. We don't want to put on body fat on top of muscle. We want to just gain muscle at this point, because you probably put on already a little bit of body fat in that post-show period. You can kind of maintain that through the off season if you can. Now, 8 weeks go by, then you have 4 months, maybe 5, to put on, to do like a push phase. I will say for my own in my own experience, 5 months is a little long to do something like that you just got done doing a 5-6 month prep, and especially with food being higher, appetite might start to get lower towards the back end of that push phase. I would say somewhere between 16 to 20 weeks is a good push phase. Then you need time before your prep to let your body kind of rest and recover from PEDs and pushing food high. And we can call this a pre-prep phase. And what you can do in this, let's just say it's 8 weeks. In the first 4 weeks of this pre-prep phase, you still have PEDs in your system for at least 3 to 4 weeks, especially like testosterone levels, using longer esters. That's going to take about 4 weeks to kind of clear the system. So you can use that to your advantage as your PEDs are coming down and in the pre-prep phase to bring food down, even if it's down just to maintenance calories, and you add in a little bit of cardio or something like that. You might not even have to do that, especially if you're maintaining a decent amount of cardio in your push phase, right? You can bring down body fat levels and bring your weight down a little bit more aggressively in that pre-prep phase, not to the point where you're hindering your sleep or your recovery, but just bring a little bit of that extra fluff off, and you'll see some water retention come down off of that too because of the lower PEDs. So in that pre-prep phase is a good time to take advantage of that, that 4 month push phase you did, that PEDs are starting to come out of the system. Take advantage of that pre-prep phase, bring some body fat off a little bit more aggressively, and then you have another 4 weeks to kind of just hold before you start prep, and let heart health markers kind of get back into optimal levels, that kind of thing, before you start a prep and add PEDs back in for your prep. And if a prep is anywhere between 4 to 6 months, that puts you about a year of an off season. From the time you're on stage to the next time you get on stage is about a year. So the recovery diet is beneficial for some. and the reverse diet is beneficial for some. It depends on what the situation is and what your goal is and how much time you have. Again, if you're doing the recovery diet, this is not the time to be obsessed over glute striations and holding your body back from just letting it kind of come back to homeostasis. If it wants to sit 10 pounds above stage weight, you need to pull your food down like into a calorie deficit to bring that weight back down, just to get that conditioning back that was closer to like your peak week conditioning. You don't need to do that. And there'll be athletes out there too that will say, that will maybe not even check in post show. They'll go into like reverse dieting, but they're really having a vacation with the family or something like that, eating a lot of food. They blow up 10, 15 pounds. And then like a couple weeks later, like, coach, I'm feeling a little too high body fat. Could we go back into a diet? No, you cannot. And unfortunately, you've already kind of messed that up. All right. So now it's time to just hold where you are for a little while, especially if lab markers aren't where they need to be. You need to let things keep recovering, especially if training performance isn't where it needs to be. You need to keep recovering and let these things, start, getting better in the gym, better sleep, etc. So no, you can't go back into a diet, 4-6 weeks after contest prep because you put on too much body fat post show. Once that's done, it's done. Just hold that, okay? Now, you go in through your off season. Now, if you have a longer off season, like I said, 18 months, 2 years, etc., you can plan a mini cut in there somewhere, after a good off season push at that point. But try to maintain those. Don't let body fat levels just keep creeping up. After a certain amount of body fat, you're not putting on any more muscle tissue. You're just putting more body fat. That's harder. That's going to make it harder to come off later on. So, in that post show period, it just really depends on the athlete's situation and what the goal is. And if, once especially in that recovery diet too, like we're trying to take advantage a little bit of the food that's being put back in to gain muscle because we don't have a lot of time. You can only gain so much muscle in a certain time period, high PEDs or not. But we want to take advantage of that food. And that doesn't mean go eat everything. Like I said, you're not doing these high cheat meals once, twice a week just to bring your food down a little lower on the other days so that you can keep a calorie balance throughout the week. That's not helping your training performance. You want to evenly spread it out so that training performance on each day is good. You're not messing with your sleep. You're not messing with your digestion. Very important. So the recovery diet can be beneficial for some. It really depends. And a lot of people will think, especially, in this day and age, like, where a lot of people are wanting to stay a little bit more lean post show, and that's totally fine. It's that for that athlete, they might need to do that. Okay. So for an example, if you're, an open bodybuilder or even 212 bodybuilder or classic or whatever, right? And you need to stay a little bit more conditioned and stay within striking distance, the reverse diet and staying a little bit leaner in that post-show period is going to be important for future success. So that, in the next prep isn't too hard, and you're not having to undo a lot of that body fat that you put on initially. So, with the recovery diet being, but that's what we have a prep for. If you have 16 to 20 weeks, you have plenty of time to get body fat off if you're not pushing 40 plus pounds above the stage weight that you want to be the next time you get on stage. Because let's just say we're losing 2 pounds per week in prep. If your timeline, if you don't have enough time to get all that body fat off that you put on, you're going to be in trouble. And you're going to have to extend your prep or show period or whatever. You're just not going to be in condition. So in that post-show period, we can let body fat levels come up a little higher, but just hold and maintain that throughout the health phase. And then through the push off-season phase, with PEDs in, that doesn't mean keep pushing food up so that body fat gets higher, right? You have PEDs doing a lot of the work. Food doesn't need to be pushed so high to just keep accruing body fat. You can kind of maintain that level of conditioning through the off season, and then when it's time for that pre-prep phase, it brings some initially bring some of that body fat off, set you up not to get a good start on your prep, so that it's not so grueling at the grueling. But you always want to be a little bit more aggressive on the front end, so that you can always add food back in later, but you can't add time. So that pre-prep phase will be important. The beginning of your prep will be important to get some of that initial body fat off that you may have accrued in the off season. But we want to keep body fat, especially for males, like 15%, above 15% body fat. At that point, it's starting to get a little bit risky with, adding more body fat, more body fat, more body fat. At this point, we kind of want to like maintain that level of body fat at, say, sub 15% through the whole off season. Let body weight creep up with PED supplementation and muscle accrual, not body fat accrual. So I hope that makes sense. Going back to like what I said with reverse dieting and like reverse recovery dieting, it's going to be different and dependent on the athlete and the situation, how much time you have. And even with reverse dieting, a lot of people deal with body dysmorphia. Okay, so you're not going to maintain that level of stage condition that you had, and it's not healthy to do so. You do have to add some body fat back on. But again, depending on what your situation is, how often you have to compete, if you need to stay within striking distance, you want to keep that to a minimum. Even if you're doing the recovery diet, try to keep that to a minimum still, but you can use food, and math, right? We're using math to, okay, this is 10% above my maintenance calories. I'm sleeping good, my performance, I'm logging everything in my logbook, and my performance is increasing in the gym. So I'm good here. I don't need to let body fat keep going up so that I can push more weight in the gym, because weight moves weight. No, that's not it. We want to gain muscle tissue without the body fat. But again, this is not a time to obsess over glute striations and staying in stage condition. So it just take that for what it is. Like, just based on your situation, and if you work with a coach, just listen to your coach. They probably know what's going to be the best thing for you, and come up with a game plan. It should be a collaboration, but if you don't know much about bodybuilding, they do, and let them do their job and let them take the reins on it. And if they say we're reverse dieting, you're reverse dieting. Try not to go off plan so much. If they give you a free meal, that's when you go have your free meal. If they don't give you a free meal, you're not going out and binging, and then your coach is having to, like, either they're gonna bring calories down the rest of the week so that it's a calorie balance. But in my opinion, again, like, if you're doing that and you're putting extra body fat back on that's not needed, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, and it's just going to create a longer off season for you, and maybe a longer prep and more grueling prep in the future. Because no, we're not going back into a diet 4 to 6 weeks after your contest. At that point, it is what it is. So, and that with body dysmorphia, coming out of a show, a lot of people deal with that. You have to weigh out the we call it instant gratification of, like, having good pictures to post on Instagram versus gaining the muscle that's needed to look different at your next show and win, or just come in with a better package. So, you're slowing yourself down if you're going back and forth of, oh, I did this cheat meal, now I'm going to bring calories lower, or I gain a lot of body fat within this time frame, I need to go back into a diet. Like, you're just adding time to extending your off season that's not needed, or you're adding time to your prep and making it a little harder for yourself. So again, I hope that was helpful. Your coach will know what to do, most likely, but it's just some food for thought. Like, because I know a lot of people that deal, with the whole, like, they gained a little bit of weight post show, and they're kind of battling with that, but this may be the athlete that needs that. This may be the athlete that needs to let body fat come up a little, a little higher initially, and then just kind of maintain that through the off season. And that's okay because it may work to your advantage with putting on a little bit more muscle mass. I put on 20 pounds in 1 year. Okay, I did a 4.5 month off season push phase. I don't think I gained all of my 20 pounds in that 4.5 to 5 months of pushing supplements and food higher. I think it started from that initial post-show period where I brought calories 10% above maintenance. I let myself put on a little bit more body fat initially, and then I just kind of maintained that through my off season before it was time to prep. And in that pre-prep phase, I brought a little bit more fluff off initially because I'm taking advantage of the PEDs are still in the system to maintain muscle tissue because you can aggressively bring food down a little lower. Maybe it's just the maintenance calories. I don't think you need to go below maintenance calories most of the time in that period because you're getting ready to do a contest prep. Save that for the contest prep for the beginning because you can pull off a couple pounds in that pre-prep phase, maintain a lot of muscle tissue because PEDs are still in the system, and then hold, and then prep starts and bring as PEDs come back in. You start to bring food down a little bit more aggressively below maintenance calories, add cardio in, etc., and you'll see a lot of that initial weight fall off. And then prep going towards the show, a little bit closer to the show, you can kind of start to cruise into it instead of like racing to the finish line. So yeah, that's just in my experience what's worked for me and a couple of my athletes that are, especially like the males that need to put on a little bit more size in a shorter amount of time. But again, if you have a long, let's say 2 years, taking 2 years off the stage, you're going to take 2 years off because maybe you have some work goals coming up or you have some vacations and trips planned and stuff to where you want to take 2 years off from the stage or you're going to need to. And now you have a little bit more time. Take that post-show phase a little bit more conservatively on the reverse diet side rather than recovery diet side because you have plenty of time to add muscle mass later on. And then we don't have to add as many like mini cuts or cleanup phases within those off seasons. You still most likely will need to if you have a longer off season, a 2 year off season, but you just want to keep it to a minimum because you can maintain that conditioning a little bit better. So yeah, so those are the differences between reverse and recovery diet. So please like, share, subscribe if that was helpful. I'll be putting out some more videos, educational stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that you learn with experience. Obviously, things on paper will work out a little bit differently in practical applications. Sometimes, we need to do what's best for ourselves or best for the athlete and within the given goal and time frame that we have. So yeah.